Welcome, friends, to our Spring Plant Circle for Plant Baby Plant. We're so glad that you chose to join us as we gather our growing community. We're excited to visit with our guests and, of course, with you. Even though we are many and spread all over the world, we're going to gather in the spirit of friends sitting together on a spring afternoon to share stories and news of raising a garden and raising a ruckus. I hope you have a cup of tea close at hand and maybe your favorite treats stacked on top of those seed catalogs. Perhaps you could put in the chat where you are joining from. We are gathered on the vernal equinox when night and day are in balance here in the Northern Hemisphere. Winter darkness for plants is regenerative, but we also recognize and grieve the darkness of destruction in the world today. Planting and celebrating spring may seem like a luxury in the face of these grave harms, but renewing our commitments to life-giving land is an act of resistance. From here, the light overtakes the dark and the world wakes up. We gather in the spirit of gratitude for the many gifts of the living world, for spring rain, for the smell of soil, for birdsong, puddles, thunder, and mud. And here in the northeast of Turtle Island, in Maple Nation, after a very long and snowy winter, the maples are awake and the sap is running. I had a first drink of that maple water just the other day. Oh, it is the best spring medicine, and fires are going in the sugar shacks today. What marks this moment for you and in your place? Would you share in the chat what signs of spring you are welcoming now? Give us a sense of what spring sounds and smells and looks like out your window. We've chosen as our theme for this time something which is happening around all of us, of budding, as we emerge from winter into the season of growth for the land and for our Plant Baby Plant movement. The work of Plant Baby Plant includes both restoration and restoration. And so together we celebrate our tools, which include seeds and shovels and also stories, the transformative power of words. So I'm going to pass over to Christy for an opening poem.
Thanks, Robin. And hello from beautiful Bend, Oregon, where with some assistance from daylight savings, spring has truly sprung this week. In addition to serving as secretary of the Plant Baby Plant Board, I help coordinate the many events that Robin travels to across the country. These trips, while incredibly rewarding, most often find her in planes, trains, in lecture halls, and behind microphones, far from the landscapes and wild places that inspired her work. And let's be honest, being out in the world can be kind of scary these days. We're all living through a moment that feels turbulent, to say the least, politically, socially, environmentally. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the noise and uncertainty of it all. So here's your reminder. Art is the antidote. Stories and poems and music help us slow down, pay attention, and reconnect to that steady calm of the natural world, which grounds us and provides us with the perspectives we need to keep showing up for this important work. Few writers capture that feeling more beautifully than Wendell Berry. Here is the piece of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
One of the great pleasures of this season for many of us is watching the slow unfolding of spring. And for me, bud watching is part of it. I find them fascinating, botanically, aesthetically, and as these tiny models of creativity and continuity through the generations. In art and science and culture, buds are iconic representations of becoming. And that's why the protagonist in my new children's book is named Bud, for that process of opening to the world. Spoiler alert from the cover, Bud does find her gift, and no surprise, it is planting. Speaking of little girls, I remember one fall, it was many years ago now, and we were watching red and yellow leaves flutter down from the trees with my daughter, who was in kindergarten at the time. And we were having so much fun, but suddenly she got really quite distressed. And she looked at all of the leaves on the ground, and she said, with tears welling up, she said, "How will the leaves get back up again?" I loved that question. What a good question. And the answer, of course, is buds. The antidote to fall is spring, because every leaf that fell left behind a new set of leaves packed inside a protective bud. And just think of it. I mean, how many leaves were on the ground? And today there are just as many, in fact, even more buds than leaves. In fact, if you look on this horse chestnut bud, you can actually see where last year's leaf was attached, the little leaf scar at the base of the bud. And the bud itself, as we can see, is covered in those thick, waxy scales. Sometimes it's resin or oil or fuzz. They all function to keep that bud protected all winter long. And it looks almost dead, it looks inert, but inside, of course, it is the seat of regeneration. Inside every bud is an embryonic shoot, a tiny miniature replica of its parent, compressed into just a tiny little nub, which is perfect in every detail, just waiting for spring, waiting to unfold. I like to think about a tree canopy as something like a nursery full of tightly swaddled babies waiting to be born. And buds themselves are as different as the leaves and the bark and the flowers. And with a little practice, you can identify a tree just by its distinctive buds. And each of them also unfurls in its own particular way that is a delight to watch. Winter buds are important foods for wildlife, of course, since they're packed with nutrients really contained for that baby shoot. But the resins and the other protective compounds that surround the bud have long been used in traditional medicine, like these sticky buds of balsam poplar, from which you can make a healing salve. Some buds that you'll find on a tree contain only primordial leaves, but some hold microscopic flowers. And some of them have both flowers and leaves packaged together. One of the questions that has always fascinated me is, how do they know when it's time to open? Because if they open too early, they could get frozen. If they open too late, they've missed out on some good growing time. And different plants have different cues. Some respond to temperature. Some are counting up the required days of cold before they open. Some are responding to the number and intensity of warm days, but most of them have this very sophisticated biochemical internal calendar by which they are measuring the length of the day and the length of the nights so that they can precisely time their emergence to just the right conditions. And when conditions are right, the sequence begins. First, the buds swell. They swell with water brought up from the roots, and they become so full that they start to push back the bud scales, leading botanists to shout, at least this botanist, bud break, bud break. And once released from the confines of those bud scales and into the light, the perfect little leaves begin to photosynthesize, they expand and push their way out. This beautiful sequence of opening buds was taken by our plant baby plant colleague, Tusha. And Tusha and I have bonded over the fact that in spring, most of the photos on our phone look like this, bud photos. They are a favorite kind of baby pictures. Here's one of my favorites, the unfolding of linden, Tilia americana. What are yours? What are your favorite buds to watch? Because paying deep attention to the beauty of the process deepens your connection and understanding of the trees around you, bearing witness to their becoming. And as many times as I have seen it happen, I still have a sense of awe about it. Of course, we all know in spring passionate bird watchers around us. And if you've not devoted yourself not to bird watching, but to bud watching, you're in for something special. And to close our botany lesson, in the Anishinaabe language, of which I am just a beginning student, the word used to describe budding is zagibaga, which literally means leaves emerging. The zagi is the emerging part, and the baga for the leaves. But there's more to it than that. The depth of that phrase is explained in a very rich cultural context by a wonderful language teacher and scholar by the name of James Vukolich. And James reflected that the zagi part of the word, that which refers to the emergence, literally means that which emerges from within. And that zagi appears in other words. Most significantly, it is the foundation of our word for love, where love is described as the feeling that emerges from within and flows outward. In this way, James is reminding us that plants teach us about love, about how the gifts of plants emerge from within the bud and flow out to all of us, regardless of who we are, what we believe, or where we come from. That the word for buds contains the teaching of the unconditional love and generosity that flows from our plant relatives. Thank you to James for that wonderful teaching. And Brian, let's transition over to you. Would you tell us about some of the updates in the Plant Baby Plant movement?
I would be happy to. Thank you, Robin. And thank you all of you for being here. Welcome to spring and to our second plant circle. My name is Brian Ratcliffe. I'm calling in from the greater Philadelphia area in Pennsylvania. I was an ecology graduate student of Robin's back in the day, and now I have the privilege and the pleasure of being the executive director of Plant Baby Plant. Um, I'm drinking a strong cup of mint tea this morning. So I just want to share a couple updates about the movement, about what we've been up to these last few months before we proceed through the plant circle into several incredible interviews that I don't want to keep you from much longer. As the plants themselves were, we were taking our winter months in preparation, in growing, planning for the year ahead. So we've been building our organization, we've been strengthening our strategy, planning our campaigns, and most excitingly, we've been growing our team. So Anne, would you mind coming on camera? It is such a delight to be able to introduce Anne to all of you, because she has just been such a transformative member of the new Plant Baby Plant team. So Anne, say a few words about yourself.
Thanks, Brian. My name is Anne Sigfriend, and I've joined as the Director of Partnerships and Development.
Anne, what are you drinking tea?
I am. I've got a warm cup of peppermint tea right here.
Great, same. Where are you in the world right now?
I'm dialing in from Tucson, Arizona.
And but you're not based out of Tucson, right?
That's right. I am based in Portland, Oregon, calling Cascadia my home.
Amazing. What's blooming in Cascadia right now? What's your favorite spring ephemeral this
Mm.
time of year?
Well, as an avid hiker, I always enjoy walking in the Northwest Woods, and I'd say discovering some Western Trillium on the trails is always one of my favorite moments each spring.
Amazing. Well, Anne, we're so grateful to have you here. She is she's the webbing between Plant Baby Plant and all of our partners, and we're so grateful for the growth that she will enable for us. Um, so
Thanks,
that's
Brian.
thing number one. Oh yeah, thank you. The other One of the other buds that's been forming for us this winter is our website. So we launched a newer version of our website back in December. We've been hard at work adding additional layers to that. So our incredible designer, Kate Miller, has been expanding the offerings that you'll find on plantbabyplant.com. One of the most exciting things we're happy to share with you today is new Plant Baby Plant merchandise. This is a thing that so many of you have been asking for, t-shirts and yard signs and mugs and hats, just ways of getting our message and our colors out there into the world. And so please go to our site. Please check out the merchandise. Please buy and wear our things, give them to friends. If there are elements that you'd like to see, merchandise that you don't yet see available on our site, let us know. Shoot us an email and we'll see what we can do. One other exciting element to our site is we have a lot more resources on our actions page. So we have toolkits, protocols, resources to help planters translate their ideas and their passions into action. This section will grow over time, but one of the things I'm delighted to include right now is a new environmental justice toolkit, which was prepared for us by our friends at Intersectional Environmentalist. They worked really hard on this fantastic guide that walks you through the history of the environmental justice movement and offers all kinds of practical ways for you to become engaged in that domain in your own communities. And then the other large expansion on the site is our action spotlights. This, I think, is my favorite part of our site. This is where we have stories from all of you, stories of the restorative, regenerative work that's happening all over the world that we get to showcase on our site. And so I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you to the dozens of courageous, creative planters who have been sharing your stories and your photos with us. We have stories from all over, including a local free plant and seed swap in Port Angeles, Washington, an urban farm in Abbotsford, British Columbia, a community bike planting event in Portland. That's like the most Portland thing I can think of. Habitat restoration happening in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, a serviceberry farm stand in Richmond, Virginia, the Green Herons Youth Action Projects in St. Catharines, Ontario, a community food garden in Birmingham, England, and many, many, many more that I haven't listed. Please do yourself a favor and go visit that part of our site and just grow inspired. I read through these stories and I get so hopeful and so animated and so grateful for the just the work that you're doing and the generosity in sharing it with us. And so I guess my final call to action here is please, if you are out there in the world, if you're listening to this and you are doing something that heals the land or builds community or grows power, please consider sharing it with us. We have a new form on the site that allows you to, hopefully in a pretty easy way, share what you're up to. And so we are so happy to be able to be a platform to broadcast that good news to the world. All right, two more updates from the movement. But for these, I'm going to draw on a couple outside voices of our partners. So let me set the stage. So one of the ways that Plant Baby Plant shows up in the world is through our live in-person events. So like Christy mentioned a little while ago, Robin regularly travels all over the country. She's giving lectures, speeches, meeting with people, meeting with readers of her books. Plant Baby Plant works with her hosts to organize what we call blooms. These are community-centered events that are designed to translate that energy from her appearance, all the people coming to hear her speak, and yeah, translate that into concrete action on the ground. Sometimes that's restoration work, sometimes that's public communal art making, sometimes that's music, any joint act of creative resistance. And so we have several really exciting blooms coming up this spring. So I do encourage you, raise your hand on our site. Make sure that you're on our newsletter so you'll learn about them in advance. Today, though, I want to share the story of a bloom that wasn't. So back in February, we had an absolutely amazing bloom planned. Robin was visiting Honolulu. She was visiting a school in Honolulu. And in the months leading up to it, we collaborated with this absolutely inspiring public servant named Winona. She works for the Hawaii Department of Land and Natural Resources, and she had planned an extraordinary day of service. I don't want to say too much more about it because you're about to hear, but I will just say that the weather did not cooperate with us, and this torrential rainstorm came on the morning of and had to cancel the entire event. We didn't want Winona's hard work to go uncelebrated, and so we have decided to invite her here to just share a little bit about her vision for this bloom that wasn't. So, Winona, tell us about it.
Aloha. My name is Winona, and I am with the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Forestry and Wildlife. We were almost able to host a bloom in the Ahupua'a, or Land Division, of Moanalua. Unfortunately, it was canceled, but I will share about the areas in which we were going to work and why they are so special. Our plan was to start in Kamananui Valley, which reaches all the way to the summit of the Ko'olau mountain range. It is home to native birds like our Oahu elepaio, as well as various archaeological sites, including the remnants of structures built in the 1890s. One of the most significant sites is the home of a ki'ipohaku or petroglyph rock, with drawings that are roughly 1,000 years old. This pohaku, or stone, is one of the reasons the valley was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. Now the work being done in the valley includes the care of this area, which we call our education forest. Some plants here include pili grass, used for things like thatching for traditional Hawaiian homes, and mamaki, a native plant commonly used to make a delicious tea. It is often here that we meet for monthly workdays, where we weed, plant, and then do crafts such as weaving, natural dye demonstrations, and cordage making. Then we were going to follow the water to Ke'ehi Lagoon. The Ahupua'a system was largely based on access to water, so that, from the moss of the forest to the seaweed of the ocean, everyone had enough, including native seabirds like our manuoku. The lagoon would once have been a part of a larger complex of lo'ikalo, taro patches, and loko'i'a, fish ponds, but is now part of an industrial complex of warehouses, roadways, and the nearby airport. While there, we were going to enjoy some food, drink, and entertainment from none other than my mom, a local entertainer, in the Memorial Hall, and hear about the current work of the Ke'ehi Memorial Organization, which is dedicated to Hawaii's veterans. Then we were going to do some clearing of mangrove and talk about native plants in the area like Naupaka kahakai, one of the coastal varieties of a plant with species that can be found from the mountains to the sea. We are thankful to all of our partners, also from the mountains to the sea, that would have shared information with participants. They include the Division of State Parks, Division of Aquatic Resources, Moanalua Gardens Foundation, KMWP, and Mauliola Ke'ehi. Thank you so much for listening, and all the best in your good works.
Hi, it's me again. Okay, so remember how a minute ago I said that our website has a bunch of new resources under the action page? I mentioned the EJ Toolkit, there's others. One of the other new ones comes to us by way of this fantastic New York City-based nonprofit called Brooklyn Rewilders. So they just reached out to us back in January, and they wanted to tell us about a project that they've been dreaming up. And Robin read this email and immediately knew she had to sit down and talk to them about it. So Robin met just last week with two leaders of Brooklyn Rewilders, Susan Joy and Lena McCarthy, to hear a bit about their organization and their new project. We are going to now share an excerpt of that conversation. We've edited it down a bit for brevity. If you like what you hear and want to hear the fuller conversation, I encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and give it a listen.
One of the joys of watching the plant baby plant community grow, of stories of planting projects, projects that just make you say, yes, that's it. That's exactly what we need to be doing together. And that big yes was my response when I first heard about Fences of Abundance. So we are grateful that Susan Joy and Lena McCarthy agreed to join us to tell us more about this remarkable project. So for our listeners, could you introduce yourselves and the Fences of Abundance project? What are you up to?
Thank you so much for having us, Robin. We're really excited to be here. You've been a massive inspiration for us. So we're just very, very grateful to be in community with you. And so we are Brooklyn Rewilders. We do after school and in school programming with children in Brooklyn public schools. And we are launching Fences of Abundance, which it really stemmed from an experience that I had when I was first stewarding the public school garden that my daughter goes to. And it was the first summer that I spent in the garden, really just getting to know it. I didn't know what was there, and I was watching things grow. And a guy just walked past the fence, just a real neighborhood guy, not someone you'd think would be interested in the garden. And he's just walking along, and all of a sudden he stopped and he looked with such delight. His face just lit up with delight because there we have a fig tree, but underneath the fig was a whole tangle of raspberries, which really didn't even know that they were there and that they were fruiting. And but he saw a raspberry and he reached in and he picked it, and his face just lit up with delight. And then when he walked off with more swagger and some more spring in his step. And I was just like, that is what we want. And so that fall, with my garden committee at PS9, we got in there, ripped all the raspberries out from underneath the fig tree, and then spread them along the fence so that everyone could actually reach them. And it's been 3 years now, and yeah, kids come past, nannies come past with their little chargers, and every day to see what's growing. So it's been really, really wonderful. And of course, when I heard you earlier this year say, how are we going to fall in love with the world if we don't pick berries? That's where everything just clicked. It was like, that is it. We have to turn this into a program. We have to actually bring it to fruition and get it out there for everyone, this idea.
Yeah, and I've worked with a lot of gardens over many years in Brooklyn. So I helped start a bunch of rooftop farms around the city, and they're wonderful, but there is something very they're blocked off from access a lot of times. They're either private or they're projects where certainly people don't feel welcome to walk in. And so one of the conversations we were having was around we work with children so much. And one of the things that children learn quickly is where can I go and where can't I go? Or what's allowed and what isn't allowed. And I think so much of that related to the city and to land and plants is about them understanding that the world is theirs, right? And this idea of moving from that idea of scarcity to abundance.
One of the things, of the many things that I love about this project, how you just expressed that is breathing life into the commons again, isn't it? That this
Yes,
is yours.
totally.
The
Absolutely.
generosity of the plants and the place is a common good. It shouldn't be behind a fence, it's on the fence.
Totally.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
it's so it feels so rich and appropriate in all of these ways of both restoration and restoration of that return to the commons. And I would love to hear you talk a little bit about your place because Brooklyn is such a
Yeah.
built environment. Why is it particularly important to create spaces for plants, for wildlife, for people in such a setting?
Yeah, absolutely. It Brooklyn is very urban. It's an urban environment and it's harsh. Like it's can be kind of brutal for plants. We've been working on some tree bed habitat projects and we see it's just such a harsh environment. But it doesn't have to be. There is actually a lot of biodiversity and there could be a lot more. We just need more native plants everywhere.
And one of the things this project also combats is this idea that, things that grow or things in the city are gross, right?
Yeah.
Or forbidden, or this idea of like, one of the things certainly we get asked, and all of our, comrades in urban gardening is people are often like, but isn't this going to make me sick, right? Like acid rain, or, is the soil okay?
Or the dog pee.
Or the dog pee, right? But like I think for the most part, we aren't growing things in places where there's dog pee. And in fact, there's so much that can be done to even in small, simple ways to create healthy environments. Part of the joy of this project is also that knowledge of like, raspberries grow on bushes, right? And like this is blueberries grow on these bushes and you can pluck them and eat them. Like that
Yeah.
process and that joy can happen even in a city, which I think, again, there's so much around cities that feels not permissible.
Yeah, I see it as invitational. We want to have a signage that's very invitational, inviting people in and saying, you have permission to do this. But think about the honorable harvest. How can you think about the honorable harvest as you are harvesting? So, that comes back to your work, Robin, and it really has inspired us. And so we're also thinking like, how can we put a sign up so that people learn the honorable harvest? Because for me, I see like if we all learned the honorable harvest and applied that to our lives, not just in berry picking, not just in fishing or any other activity, but in every activity, even our shopping. Like if we applied the tenets of the honorable harvest, like what a different and more beautiful world we would be living in.
So these fences are places of education and reframing,
Yeah. Yes.
as well as falling in love with land and berries. And wow, yeah, you're giving us really good examples of the way that when we heal our relationship to plants, we also change the story. That's
Absolutely.
beautiful. I suppose this conversation is probably igniting a lot of interest in plant baby plant folks. So if somebody wanted to start something similar in their city, where would they begin? What are the tools that we might be able to offer?
We have a protocol that they can use and then join our community of practice. We're going to set up some WhatsApp groups for now. If it gets bigger, we'll have to do something else. But we'll create a community where we can all share resources and what's working and troubleshoot things. And yeah, they will be downloadable from our website, brooklynrewilders.org, from the Fences of Abundance page. And it's all about uh, including native plants wherever possible, having native plants, having edible plants within that, and creating that invitation with signage. We're going to have signage as well that people can buy, but people could make their own signage just as long as it's invitational.
And the beauty of it is that, like, you know, it can be done so small, right?
Yeah.
You can do it with a tiny, a fence that's 4 feet long, right? And plant one bush, and that works, right?
Yeah.
That's effective. And that's the goal, is that it's something that can be so easily replicated.
And then also that they garden for wildlife, so that you're going to include some more native plants around that's pollinator friendly, and let there be that mess, that ecological mess that's needed for the insects. Leave the leaves, leave the stalks, and don't cut them back until the next spring. So these are the things that are important, I think. And what I have learned and noticed, and research continues to show it, like, if you build it, they will come, right? So if you build habitat, there's so many examples of people building habitat and then animals coming back, bees coming back, all kinds of insects coming back. And so we just need to do it.
I love that. We just need to do it. And you've offered us a powerful inspiration to do that in an example of a gift economy that does all of the work for our neighbors, both human and more than human. I can't wait to see how Fences of Abundance takes off in the world. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your story, and I know that you're an inspiration to us all.
Oh, thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
You
We
are.
are so grateful for you creating this space to have these conversations. It feels so necessary right now in the world to be talking about joy and abundance and connection and, being very present, joyful beings on this planet as much as we can. So,
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, friends.
Such
Thank
an
you.
inspiration for us.
Welcome back. Okay, so now we turn to our final interview of the Plant Circle. So last week, we had the immense privilege of being joined by Sean Sherman, the Oglala Lakota chef, educator, and activist. Sean joined Robin for an absolutely electric conversation that explored Indigenous food sovereignty as a form of cultural and ecological resistance. The conversation also touched on the ongoing political situation in Minneapolis. It was an incredibly rich conversation and went very long. And we can't share the full interview here just for time, but what we have prepared instead is something of a preview of that discussion. I do urge you to listen to the full hour-long conversation. You can find that again over on our YouTube page. But for now, enjoy this.
I am so delighted to welcome our special guest to the Plant Circle, Chef Sean Sherman. So, for our listeners who don't yet know Sean's transformative work, you'll get to learn a lot more today. But Sean Sherman is an Oglala Lakota chef, educator, and activist who is known for his work in revitalizing Indigenous food systems across Turtle Island. Born and raised on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, Sean has spent decades researching traditional Indigenous foods, cooking techniques, and foodways. He is known to many as the Sioux Chef and is the founder of Natives, which we'll hear a little bit more about in a minute, which is a nonprofit dedicated to restoring Indigenous food knowledge and strengthening Native food ways. He is also an author of award-winning cookbooks, the Sioux Chef's Indigenous Kitchen. And just a few months ago, oh, it's so heavy. Here we are. This beautiful new book, Turtle Island: Foods and Traditions of the Indigenous Peoples of North America, which I've been just giving to everybody. Sean is also the founder of the acclaimed Minneapolis restaurant Owamni, which focuses on ingredients native to Turtle Island. And friends, it is a destination all on its own. Go. Um, I was trying to think of my favorites. I couldn't. The corn cakes, the trout, the bison, the wajapi, and the teas. Through his cooking, writing, teaching, and advocacy, Sean works to reconnect communities with land, plants, and Indigenous culinary traditions. And one of the themes that we explore and try to act on in Plant Baby Plant is the importance of both restoration and restoration, healing land and healing our relationships with land. And Sean's work adds another deep dimension to that duo in the way that food heals land, heals relationships, and also heals people and communities. So, welcome, Sean. We are so grateful that you took the time to mark the spring equinox with us and to share some of your wonderful ideas. Let's start big picture, for people who haven't yet encountered your work. How do you describe what you do?
Oh, we do a lot, So natives or North American traditional indigenous food systems is the main driving piece that we do. I'm the executive director, and that's where we have all of our employees and all of our crazy atmosphere of everything that we do, including the restaurant, which is also a part of that nonprofit family. And so, Natives was really designed to try and figure out ways to create food access, especially to tribal communities and indigenous peoples in general, how to really look at a non-Eurocentric version of academia and education and really think about indigenous education. So not only do we work with indigenous food sovereignty, but we also work with indigenous educational sovereignty. And so we just really want to bring the power of both of those two things back to our peoples. Because a lot of this work is really just a reflection of just what I grew up with on Pine Ridge, not having access to nutritional foods, number one, but not having access to any cultural foods hardly at all, So we did have like a few things growing up on Pine Ridge, like timsala, which is the prairie turnip, choke cherries, of course, junipers, roses out there in the plains, some wild onions. But overall, and hunting, because animals are a little bit easier to identify. But really, like, we didn't have much food growing up that spoke to us culturally, that spoke to us traditionally. And we still face a lot of foodborne illnesses in places like Pine Ridge, South Dakota. And, for me as a chef, when I had this epiphany of doing this work, it was really just trying to make the world better, to make the next generation hopefully have access to some of these foods, to understand what they were. And, for me, it was a journey, because when I realized that I didn't know anything about my Lakota heritage in culinary, even though I'd learned so much about culinary foods from around the world. And, I could easily name hundreds of European recipes off the top of my head in European languages. I knew very little about Lakota foodways. And so I spent quite a few years just researching, and I turned to ethnobotany as really one of the main beginning foundational spaces to research, because I knew that my Lakota ancestors had a full extent of knowledge of plants around us and what to do with everything, because plants gave us everything. They help us build lodging and tools and weapons and clothing, and they help us with food and medicine, of course, and they're woven into our stories and our mythologies and our religions, and it's a part of who we are, and to see all of that missing, was something that it just was so blaring at the moment when I realized it. And I just set myself on a path to learn as much as I could, and I crawled into obviously a lifetime worth of learning. I'll never get to the end of this education, but it's okay, and so it brought about challenges of how do we bring Indigenous foods into the modern world today, and what is the philosophy that I would want to bring with it, so for my philosophy, in order to showcase and highlight modern Indigenous foods, I just cut away colonial ingredients of things that European immigrants brought over. And so we removed things that didn't exist here before in the culinary world. So there was no dairy or wheat flour or cane sugar or beef or pork or chicken. We focused on wild animals. We, of course, focused on all the wild plants. We focused on heirloom agriculture. And we focused on the different techniques of food preservation and cooking and where do we get things like salts and fats and sugars to cook with. And so many questions, and there's so much diversity amongst Indigenous peoples that there was no one way to do it, everything. And so it was this big journey of trying to understand how to apply that. And, so I just started doing it, started doing Native and Indigenous pop-up dinners early on when I had nothing. And just, trying to attempt to showcase that there's a place in the world for our Indigenous foods still today. And it's been quite the journey, So I formed the company, the Sioux Chef, in 2014. Utilizing that philosophy, slowly built a ragtag team of people who really wanted to work with these Indigenous foods, and we grew over the years. We worked on that first cookbook, the Sioux Chef's Indigenous Kitchen. We opened up Tatanka Truck, which was our first food truck. We eventually were able to launch the nonprofit Natives, and we started working towards the restaurant, which became a Wamni, and which opened in 2021 to many successes. And so we've done so much. We have a very bright future in front of us. And Natives has its vision on not only recreating what we've created here in Minnesota and moving that around. We're getting ready to move our programming into Montana, and we have some monies to do that the same in Alaska. But our goal is to place pinpoints all over the place. And basically the model is we have Natives has what's called a kitchen program called Meals for Native Institutions, where we're doing institutional foods to get foods directly out to schools and hospitals. We do a lot of education, and that's led by Linda Black Elk in our educational department, and she's got a great team. They do a lot of video work, so we have over 200 videos on YouTube, and a lot of them are plant-based videos that people could find, and a lot of them are cooking videos too. And so we want to continue to create a space and an archive of Indigenous education out there for people to access very easily. And then we also created a market space called Indigenous Food Lab Market, where people can order Indigenous foods from Indigenous producers online, and they can get sent to you wherever you might be. And we also have a wholesale program, so we can sell bulk foods towards larger groups like restaurants or universities or hospitals or anybody else that wants to buy these foods. And the restaurant we use as a tool because we know restaurants will never act as a place for food access, particularly or food relief, because restaurants are privileged to go to. And Wamni is a nice restaurant, and it's a little bit expensive, and it's okay because it supports a lot of jobs. We've had upwards to 150 employees at that restaurant in our busy months, and we've maintained close to 100 employees throughout the entire year. And we've been open for 5 years, and we've been sold out for pretty much the whole time that we've been open, which is amazing for a restaurant. And we're getting ready to move into a new space, which doubles the size of the restaurant. But the way we see using restaurants as a tool is it creates that workforce, which builds a whole bunch of skills around these modern Indigenous foodways, which also builds leadership because we've seen a lot of amazing leaders come up through that work. And we were also moving a ton of food dollars towards Indigenous producers because of how we intentionally purchase from Indigenous peoples regionally, locally first, and then nationally. And we're moving over $500,000 a year just towards Indigenous producers just from that one single kitchen. And it's, for us, it just raises a lot of attention for the work that we do. People get to experience Indigenous foods because unfortunately it's still very rare to find a Native American restaurant across the country, anywhere in Native America. And so that's something that we're attempting to change. And we just want to be a support system for Indigenous food operations all over the place. And so that's, and you know, and doing more education like the books, of course, which was a massive piece of work to put together, and working and talking with many people all across Turtle Island, and with the help of the two co-authors, Kristen Donnelly and Kate Nelson, like we put together something that we're very proud of, you know, and we're very happy to have released that into the world because nothing like that really existed before, to erase the colonial lines of what is US Mexico and US Canada and just look at Indigenous diversity and how much more there is to understand and learn from Indigenous peoples everywhere.
You know, I want to honor, Sean, your voice in Minneapolis and the way that your voice has echoed from Minneapolis as a vocal critic of the aggression, of the fear, of the consequences of ICE action and aggression. And in your Substack, I was really taken with your declaration, the quote, "Food systems don't lie. Um, Restaurants are like canaries in a coal mine, and the whistle is blowing." So your voice was so is continues to be so important as a voice of truth, integrity, resistance, and so there's the piece of being a powerful critic of what's going on, but also celebrating the resistance that you are a part of and that we all witnessed in Minneapolis, and the way that this resistance was creative, peaceful, and effective in
Hmm.
changing the story. So Chimagwech for your voice in that. It was so powerful. And many in our audience aspire to be part of a resistance movement, resisting the dismantling of land protections, assaults on our values, on our people, on difference, all of this, right? So
Hmm.
I'm wondering, from the heart of this resistance, are there is there a are there a couple of things, something you've observed or learned about what are the conditions that enable that kind of peaceful, generative, and effective resistance?
Yeah, you know, it was something that was really, it was such a crazy time that happened in Minneapolis. You know, we were out of the country when we saw the videos of Renee Good being murdered, you know, in Minneapolis on our streets and just a few blocks from our businesses. And just the way this administration just doubled down on its aggression, and it just made things worse. And we were in emergency mode this whole time, you know, because as restaurant people, we have many people of color working with us, and like we're largely just Indigenous because we have a ton of Indigenous peoples, but we also have people from other countries. You know, we have people from Ecuador and Mexico and other places too. And so, and you know, it was really difficult to see this happened because there was no safety net for us in the city. Our state couldn't do anything about these masked gangs of just hidden faces and no badges and people just breaking laws, breaking windows, pulling people out of cars, beating people up, spraying kids with chemicals, you know, stopping, like harassing schools. Our whole school system shut down across the city because it wasn't safe to go to school because of our own government. And that was insane, you know. And it wasn't about fraud. It wasn't about Ethiopian like stealing money from the United States. It wasn't about dangerous criminals. This was just a racist movement, you know. And you know, we see in the news how people are saying, "Oh, this is unprecedented." But as people of color, like we've seen this happen. You know, this has been a norm for us for most of the United States history. And so it was really important for us to come together, you know. And I think some of the conditions, I feel like this administration wanted us to create a circumstance like the George Floyd uprising. And I think they wanted violence. I think they wanted people to start something so they could make themselves more aggressive, you know. But we didn't want that. We didn't want to fall for the bait. And Minneapolis just kind of came together almost overnight. It felt like there was all of a sudden just just a network of resistance, of people communicating with each other, of helping to get food to families that need it, that we're trying to hide from our own government, of trying to get safe passage to workers, just trying to get to work, and the restaurant industry was collapsing. I don't think we could have lasted another month in Minneapolis. I think most restaurants would have shut down because there was no way. We had to stop and ask ourselves, can we open up a new restaurant under a fascist police state? Like, we shouldn't be having that conversation in America, but that's what we had to stop and do because we're getting ready to open up a larger restaurant, and we had to like address that particular situation because it was happening to us in real time. And the media wasn't portraying everything that was happening because we were on all these signal chats all over the place, and so much amazing like support and relief for coming in, and that we were just getting people rental support, food support, just supplies. It was different in COVID completely, because this was unnecessary. This was something that could be controlled by just not doing it, right? And so, but again, like our own cities couldn't help us, our police systems couldn't help us, our state governments couldn't help us. It was just overrun with this stuff, and we had nobody to rely on but ourselves. And I thought we really did it well. And I think that everybody in Minneapolis is very proud of how we stood up against this resistance, And the biggest thing is like we just didn't want this to happen to other cities across the United States. And so for me, coming from the food service industry, I also realized that, I've gotten a lot of attention as a chef, and we're connected to other bigger name chefs, so I wrote a letter. I called up some of my friends like Jose Andres, and we were able to meet in Washington and bring a letter with over nearly 3,000 signatures directly to Tina Smith's office to the Senate. And just like, you guys cannot fund DHS more money if this is the aggression that they're going to do. If they're just going to lawlessly terrorize American cities, this cannot happen in other cities. Like, we can weather the ice here in Minneapolis because that's what we do, but we can't see this happening across America. So you guys have to hold the line. You have to just not fund more money because they already had billions of dollars and they're asking for more billions of dollars. And so I was just trying to use my voice, and we were all just trying to do the best we can, because we came together early before all that aggression in December and met. So we had a lot of Somali leaders and people from the Latin community meeting with us, and people from the city and people from Ilhan's office. And we all were just trying to get in front of what we saw coming, assuming there was going to be massive food relief, but we didn't know how bad it was going to get, that they were just going to get away with literal murder in the streets and double down on what they were doing, and there still, it hasn't cleared out. They're still harassing us. There's still like nearly 1,000 agents still in Minneapolis when we had 150 for a 5-state region before all this started, so there's no drawdown yet. It's still completely happening. And their home base happens to be right above Badote, which is the center space for all Dakota people. And it's right in Fort Snelling, where one of America's first concentration camps after the Dakota Wars happened, where my direct relatives come from, because we were kicked out of Minnesota and forced into Crow Creek, South Dakota, through a long boat ride. And so it's just even more salt in the wound to have that headquarters right there and that really traumatic space for us as Indigenous peoples.
Thank you for that really powerful witness that guides us all. You've created a kind of a medicine that can be disseminated for how to do this. So Chimagwech for that powerful and ongoing work that invites every one of us into that space. We are celebrating, this plant circle takes place on the vernal equinox, when darkness and lightness are exactly equal, no? And from now to the solstice, the light is winning. And,
Yeah.
and this time of enhanced light and energy and all that symbolizes as well is also the time of buds opening. So as
Mhm.
the light grows, Sean, what buds do you want to see open in the season ahead? What emergence needs to happen?
Where we are in Minneapolis, we're still catching our breath from what happened in January and even into February here. So it felt like the longest year during that month. And I feel like we're still very connected, and we haven't let our guard down quite yet. But we see a path to strengthen ourselves, to be there for each other, to support each other, to do what we can to support those who are most vulnerable. Because I had to witness, three of my own employees be, terrorized at gunpoint from our own government, and one of them abducted, and for us to have to fight to get him back out. And I feel like it really brought us together a little bit closer. And I feel like I think the whole city kind of feels like that right now, that we're deeply connected. And we hope that we can really stand against, what is fascism, what is this aggressiveness of authoritarianism. And like we can show a better way. There's better ways out there, and we're just going to continue on our path of trying to strengthen Indigenous peoples and their food systems, and to get healthy food out, and to make sure the younger generation has access to the food, and to share education, because we don't need to put a monetary value on education every single time. We can just share beautiful knowledge to help people in the future. And that's what we're attempting to do. And again, this is a group effort. So we need people like yourselves with the storytelling that you're doing. We need people all over the place to come together and to work with each other and to lift each other up, because that's what makes us stronger. It's a people's movement that breaks this aggressiveness.
Mm. We hear your invitation, and you are an example, I think, of in those times when our so-called leaders won't lead, the people lead.
Hmm.
And the emergence of leaders like yourself are a real gift. So thank you for everything that you do, that you will do, and for joining us on the Plant Circle.
All right. Mopila.
We'll be
And with that, we will close today's Plant Circle. Allow me to offer some gratitudes and acknowledgments before we do. So first and foremost, to our special guests, Winona, Susan and Lena, and Sean, thank you all so much for sharing your stories and your wisdom with us today. Thank you to Tusha Yakovleva for coordinating all of the moving pieces behind the scenes to make these plant circles happen, to Amelia Matthews-Pett for her indispensable gifts in audio and video storytelling and editing. And thank you to the broader Plant Baby Plant family, including, of course, our newest member, Anne Sickveland, our incredible board members, Christy Henricks and Jenny Shirley, our social media whiz, Selah Moore, and our Bloom hosts, our designers, our funders, our legal team, all of our advisors. We are so supported by this network of brilliance and generosity, and I'm just so grateful for everything that you all do to help turn Robin's vision into the reality. And then last, but really most importantly, thank you to all of you, the planters, the listeners, everyone watching this, whether you're with us on the premiere on the Vernal Equinox, or whether you're listening to this days or months or years in the future. It is such a privilege to be in community with you, truly. You are the Plant Baby Plant movement. This is why we're doing it. Thank you for heeding the call to raise a garden and raise a ruckus. Robin, is there anything else you'd like to share as we draw to a close?
Oh, thank you, Brian, and thanks to everyone for joining us. Here in planting season, it feels like the response to that question of what does the earth ask of us feels loud and clear. And I hope that you're feeling inspired to go plant. Go plant native gardens, convert your yard from a carbon emitting lawn to carbon sequestering landscape. This is the time to plant trees at your school, at faith communities, at home, or on fences. It's also the time to plant our feet with political resistance to the dismantling of environmental protections, to war, to hatred, to plant your feet, to stand for Indigenous land rights and food systems, plant ourselves as allies to the good green world. We invite you to organize a plant circle of your own in your neighborhood, a local gift economy of care and planting together. It's more fun that way. As we close, I'd like to pose the same question to you all that I posed to Sean. On this vernal equinox, as the light grows, what buds do you want to see open in this season? what's the emergence that needs to happen? And I invite you all to put a message in the chat if you're so moved to inspire one another for the planting season ahead. Chi Miigwech, thank you everybody for being here with us. I'll see you at the next circle. And in the meantime, plant, baby, plants.
Cast your eye on the mighty oak, ragged branch outstretching. All that grows here above the ground is consequence of what's below. Every ache on the branch is bare, promise new